What's up, everybody? What's up? Welcome to the podcast. My name is Sebastian Gomez. If you don't know who I am, welcome to the podcast. And if you're brand new, welcome back. Good to see you. Thanks for kicking it with me and wanting to share some of your time, your day with me. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully today and what we talk about influences you in such a positive way. If you don't know who I am, my name is Sebastian. I'm a Christian. I'm 26 years old, and God has influenced me and changed my life in so many different ways. And I just want to talk about my life and how God has influenced my decision-making through problems and life. And hopefully whatever I speak about today can really just benefit you and make you feel a little more excited about life, and your soul feels a little more filled up, if you get what I'm saying. I don't know why I talked like that. But yeah, anyways, so let's talk. It's been a while. How was your week? My week was flipping crazy. It was actually a fear-filled week, a week that was chaotic, and I have a lot to talk about. And so hopefully you had a good week. I hope everything went well, and if it didn't, well, guess what? We're here to give hope and share who Christ is and what his heart is for us, for people like you and me. So yeah, I lived a fear-filled week this week. I'm saying week way too much. But at the beginning of my 7 days, at the beginning of these past 7 days, I had my truck broken into. I don't know if I talked about this in my last podcast, but yes, my truck got broken into. I had all my stuff stolen. I had my backpack stolen along with my tennis rackets. And so that really induced some fear in me because I was like, someone just broke into my truck. And what if I was there and they did something to me? So that really scared me. And then I tried to file a police report, and the police were like, nah, you can't do it here. You're going to have to do it online. And then I did it online, and what happened to me doesn't even qualify as a police report. So I was like, what the heck? So how do I get my tennis rackets back? How do I get my backpack back? And so that stressed me out. Those two things stressed me out. Then after that, on Wednesday, I went to go get some blood tests because I've been having some health issues. And I'm just praying, please keep me in your prayers, that everything is good. In Jesus' name, there's nothing inside my body that is destroying me, and I'm hoping that everything goes well. So please keep me in your prayers. I'd really appreciate that. And then on Friday, I found out that my mom fell from a countertop while she was trying to grab something and had a concussion, and she was throwing up and going through a lot of pain, and it was stressing me out because I live in California and I can't do much about it. I can't fly to New York and just stand there and just see what happens. So I had to just wait it out. So yeah, I had a lot of fear. And when the concussion happened to my mom, I was in the car with Bobby and Kian. And I remember sitting in the back just being like, I was just like, what am I doing? Like, this is, how do I handle this? I feel like anxiety is just choking me right now. It's stressing me out. And so, I wanted to cry, but I don't cry because I'm a man. Just kidding, dude. Real men cry. I cry when I watch The Chosen. I cry when I watch Jesus. But I don't cry besides that. Maybe at a sporting event, but besides that, nothing else because I'm a man. All right. So yeah, I wanted to cry, and I just was like, what do I do? And I just sat and waited on the Lord because he was definitely pretty silent this past week. Until yesterday. He was silent until yesterday. Why? Because I started reading the book of Ezekiel. Why? Because I've been talking to my friends about what it feels like to live in Los Angeles. Now, if you're not from Los Angeles, let me tell you something. Los Angeles is a beautiful city with so many fun things to offer, but it's a really hard city to be a Christian in. And it's a really hard city to lead other people and want to encourage people to hear the word of Christ when you have a lot of distractions. LA has a lot of cool things. It has cool cars, cool clothing, cool people, cool events, and so many things that can just grab our attention. And sometimes when you want to talk about your faith with others, people just don't have the time of day. And I don't blame them, even though they still have the choice to listen or not. But I don't blame them because it's hard to keep your attention out here. And so it's been hard to share my faith, And it's been scary to a certain sense because also you just don't know what other people have gone through in their lives. You don't know if their past faith, spiritual, religion experiences have destroyed their relationship with God or not. And so you never know what the reaction is. So I feel like I've been walking on a tightrope recently in that area of my life. Back then, when I first became a Christian, it was easy to talk about Christ because I was just excited. I was like, did you know that Jesus loves you? But when you get that first, why does he love me? Or when you get that first experience where people kind of push back a little bit, it can be intimidating and you can experience fear. And I love the book of Ezekiel because in the first 2 chapters on what I was reading, I related so much to his fear and his current day circumstances. And so we're going to talk about how we have to shut down the voice of fear and allow the voice of Christ to really be the dictator and the final word when it comes up to making decisions in our day-to-day lives. So let me explain to you who Ezekiel is. Ezekiel is a man who lived in Jerusalem, who was taken captive by the Babylonians after the first attack on Jerusalem. He was a Judean prisoner and he was brought back to Babylon. And during this time, the Israelites, the people who lived in Jerusalem, the Israelites were rebellious people. They didn't really listen to God anymore. They were worshiping other gods. They were practicing other practices. They were practicing other things and they weren't really giving their attention to God, and it was hurting him and he was mad and he was like, and God was just like, hey, these people are rebelling against me. And now they're losing their promise, the promise that I have over them, and I'm trying to warn them. And so God goes up to Ezekiel. One day Ezekiel's out in the river with his buddies, his Judean prisoners. That sounds weird, but he was out in the river hanging out, and all of a sudden he saw God. God appears to him. And he is just flat out scared. He just digs his face into the ground. He's looking down. He doesn't even want to look up. And God says to him, stand up, son of man. And instantly the Spirit of God goes into Ezekiel and sets him on his feet. And what I love about this story is just as Ezekiel stands up, we're going to go to Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 6. What I love about this story is that right after God tells him, hey, you're going to speak to the Israelites. You're going to tell them that they've been rebellious people and that they have had hard hearts towards me. God instantly can recognize the fear that Ezekiel has. So he goes on to say to Ezekiel, son of man, do not fear them or their words. Don't be afraid, even though their threats surround you like nettles and briars and stinging scorpions. Do not be dismayed by their dark scowls, even though they are rebels. So God, right after he calls Ezekiel to his calling or to his ministry, not his calling, because our calling is just to love God with all our hearts, our minds, and our soul. If you were wondering what your calling is, our calling is to love God with all our hearts, our minds, and our souls. That's what our calling is. But when God was calling Ezekiel to his ministry, which was speaking to the Israelites, he recognized the fear that Ezekiel was fearing. So he calls it out and he says, hey, I know you're scared. But then he goes on to give a promise to Ezekiel in Ezekiel 3:8-9. He goes on to say, but look, I've made you as obstinate and hard-hearted as they are. I've made your forehead as hard as the hardest rock. So don't be afraid of them or fear their angry looks, even though they are rebels. And I love this. Because God is willing enough to sit down, say, I see you, I hear you, I feel you. And I know that sometimes that's not enough. So I'm going to put a promise over your life and let you know that you're going to be thick-skinned. You're going to be thick-skinned and you're going to be hard-hearted. And the things that the people are going to try to do against you, it's not going to affect you as much. So don't be afraid of them or fear their angry looks, even though they are rebels. And as I was reading this, I was like, does this promise that I'm reading? Because sometimes when we read the Bible, it's a lot easier to read the New Testament and be like, oh my gosh, these are the promises of Jesus towards me. He's speaking to me. But sometimes when we read the Old Testament, we're like, these stories make no sense. And sometimes the verses are like, and God didn't like that. And God was mad at this. And we're like, God, are you mad at me right now? Do you not want me? And so sometimes it's hard to conceptualize that God is speaking through us, to us, through the Old Testament. But let me tell you something. He does. It takes a lot more effort to see where he speaks, but you need time to sit down and reflect on what you read. And so as I was reading this, I was like, does this promise that God gave to Ezekiel relate to me? And it does. Does this promise stand right now for me? And it does, because why? Why does this promise stand? Because he tells them that he will be hard-hearted, just as the Israelites, but on the opposite team, and that he'll be thick-skinned, and that he doesn't have to fear the angry looks. And you know why he says that? You know why he promises that to him? I think it's because in the first couple of verses, the Spirit came into Ezekiel. The Spirit of God came to Ezekiel. It was in him. And so I was like, well, if the Spirit of God is in Ezekiel and it's giving him the motive and the opportunity to be tough, can I be tough also and not fear? And I can, because if you read in 2 Timothy verse 1, chapter 1, verse 7, in 2 Timothy, Paul goes on to speak to Timothy, who was a student of Paul, a follower of Paul. Paul goes on to write in his letter to Timothy, for God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. So never be ashamed to tell others about our Lord, and don't be ashamed of me either. I love that because in these two different stories, Ezekiel's experiencing fear of what's going to happen in his calling, and so is Timothy. Why? Because as Paul is writing this letter to Timothy, Paul is in jail. He's in jail. He's writing this letter from jail. So Timothy already has the idea in his head, like, hey, the same thing might happen to me and I'm scared. And Paul reassures him, no, the Spirit of God, the Spirit that you have within you is not of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And I love that because it's so encouraging to know that, dude, the same living God that was in the New Testament is still here in the Old Testament. And it's cool because even if you look at Matthew chapter 10, Jesus goes out to send out the disciples and tells them, hey, you guys are going to cast out demons and you guys are going to do all these things in my name, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Even though people are going to go against you, these are going to be great opportunities for people to really get to know me and what my heart is for them. And so many times when we look at the stories of these people in the Bible, we think that these people are just men who were just the few and select, the toughest of the toughest. But they weren't. They were people like you and me. Ezekiel was 30 years old. He was just hanging out by the river, and God was like, why did I say it? Why did it sound like I was from the South? But he was just hanging out by the river. He was hanging out by the river. Oh, I love that phrase. He was hanging out by the river. Okay, ADD, sorry. He was hanging out by the river, and God just shows up and says, hey, I'm calling you to this. Don't be afraid. When Paul talks to Timothy, Timothy is just a kid. He's a kid. He's like my age. And Paul goes on to tell Timothy, don't be afraid. Even though I'm in jail, let me tell you that the Spirit of God is not of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And when Jesus goes on to send the disciples who were ordinary men, they were tax collectors, they were fishermen, they were normal people living normal lives, God picked those 12, Jesus picked those 12 and said, hey, I recognize the fear that you have, but do not fear because that is not the spirit you have within you. And can I tell you something? That spirit that you have within you, it lives within you. It lives within you. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, the reason I love 1 Corinthians chapter verse, I just lost track. But let's jump into 1 Corinthians. I need to find Corinthians. The reason I can't find Corinthians is because I didn't put a Post-it note on it. And so now I just have to figure it out. But anyways, here it is. If we were to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, it goes on to say, don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God lives in you? Dude, the Spirit of God lives in you. And what is the Spirit of God? It is love. And the Spirit of God, love casts out all fear. The Spirit of God is of power, love, and self-discipline. Love casts out all fear. We gotta stop allowing fear to have a room in our hearts. We gotta stop allowing fear have a voice in our mind. We gotta stop allowing fear to dictate the decisions we make in our lives. We have to start recognizing that fear has no place in our lives. And I wrote something down yesterday, and hopefully this can this will inspire you, or at least make you feel better. But what I wrote was this, and hopefully this helps. But I wrote, stop letting fear dictate your life. Stop letting it direct your mornings, your days, your months. Stop letting it have a voice in your life. God is closer to us than he ever was before. He's even closer than when Jesus walked on the earth. He has a home in us. And now it's up to us to notify fear that the actual homeowner of our hearts and our lives is here. It's time to kick fear to the curb and allow God to refurnish your soul, because he wants to. He delights in that. All God is saying is, give me the keys to your heart. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to store fear in the closet of your heart. You don't have to brush anxiety under the carpet of your soul. He takes care of it. When you let Christ into your heart, all you have to do is open the door, hand over the keys, and he'll do the rest. Just like Mary Poppins. I don't know. Maybe that related. Maybe I just ruined the whole story. But what I'm trying to say here as I finish this is, guys, you have a spirit of love, power, and self-discipline. Allow that self-discipline to take every thought captive. Allow that love to cast out the fear that you're experiencing. So hopefully that made sense. This is a short one, but yeah, I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I hope you guys kick fear's butt. With that being said, thanks for watching today's podcast, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.